Again, I am head of the Speakers Bureau for the Grand Jurors Association of Orange County, and we are an alumni group of past grand jurors. I belong to the, I was on the 2013-14 grand jury, as it says here, and ever since then I have been active with the Grand Jurors Association. Our association works closely with the courts and helping with recruiting every year. We have quarterly luncheons and we keep up on all the issues in the court system that pertain to the grand jury. So I just say I'm really happy to be talking to you guys. I've been told by the PIO of the court, Costas, as some of you know him, and he says that you're a select group and he really wants me to talk to you because all of you, and I'm not recruiting right now, but I'm just saying all of you are very well qualified to be a grand juror in Orange County. So when I was clicking through the internet, just checking on the League of Women Voters, I really felt like I was preaching to the choir. And on my very first, let's see if I can get this to go. Okay, how am I going to get onto my screen? Okay, maybe I do this. Okay, my very first slide. I came up when I was clicking through on the internet, I came up with this recruitment posting by one of your own, by Judith Stamper. And she was actually recruiting on behalf of the courts for the 21-22 grand jury. And I read through what she had posted, and quite frankly, I liked her definition of the grand jury better than what I had been using. So I called her up and said, would you mind if I use some of her words, your words, in my PowerPoint presentation that I give to various community organizations? And she said that would be okay. So I'm going to read what she starts out to say. In California, county grand juries are tasked with civil oversight as well as criminal indictments. We are not jury duty, by the way. We are a total different animal than jury duty. It is said that the grand juries are the voice of the people and the conscience of the community. And I love that statement. They concern themselves with any governmental activity, whether city, county, or special district. How well are they meeting their mandates, and are they spending the taxpayer money wisely? Judith goes on to say, I was a member of the 2018-19 grand jury, and it was one of the defining experiences of my life. Judith, the only thing I have to add to that part is I say it was a defining experience of my life, and I got to see the good, the bad, and the ugly during my year. So again, her words, what is the grand jury? The 19 members of the Orange County grand jury are selected from applications received from all 5 supervisory districts by a panel of Superior Court judges. They strive to include a mix of backgrounds, employment histories, and cultural experiences. The new grand jury is seated in July 1st of every year, and works for a full year. Each grand jury sets their own hours, but usually work 5 days a week. That's Monday through Friday, every day, for about 25 hours total from the court building in Santa Ana. They conclude their year by publishing reports about their investigations, which are public records and can be read at ocgrandjury.org. So I have a picture here, if you can all see it. Can you all see that? This is my grand jury. Right here, the 19 people that I served with in 2013-14. This is the courthouse that we went to every single day. And this is the conference room. I'll call it a conference room, panel room, where we all met every day on the grand jury. And that's where all of our business was transacted. The court says, this is in some of their recruitment material, but they say the role of the grand jury is to ensure the performance of county, city, and other local agencies, ensure that that performance is proper and ethical. That's really the gist of the whole thing. They improve government with their recommendations. They respond to citizen complaints about local government agencies. They issue indictments for serious crimes. and they make sure our tax dollars are spent wisely, and they evaluate conditions at our county jails. Now, evaluating conditions at our county jails, that is the only thing that the state mandates, that each county will have a grand jury, and each grand jury will look at the jails within their county and evaluate those conditions. Everything else is decided only by each panel as it's impaneled every year. Nobody can tell the grand jury what to do, but that is the one mandate that they do have. Okay, so how is the grand jury empowered? Well, there's two different areas: criminal indictments and civil investigations. Under criminal indictments, the grand jury considers evidence for possible indictment of individuals for criminal charges. Now, keep in mind, nobody's been indicted yet, nobody's been arrested yet. This is just looking at evidence for possible indictments. Nobody's been named, but I'll talk about that in a few minutes. Under the civil investigation, the grand jury provides oversight of local governments by reviewing and evaluating county and city departments, agencies, special districts, and jails within Orange County. You're going to get tired of hearing me say that probably pretty soon. But the time allocation is kind of important. About 80% of the time is on civil oversight and writing of the reports. That takes up most of the year. The reports come out toward the end of the year, just like human nature. It takes all year of investigation before they're ready to publish a report. Criminal indictments are brought in by the district attorney, and that's only about 15% of the time of the year that you spend on the grand jury is on criminal indictments. And then 5% are on citizen complaints. As I mentioned earlier, citizens can go on to ocgrandjury.org and file a citizen complaint. It will be up to the grand jury whether they have time and the effort to, and the expertise to be able to investigate that particular complaint. So I'm going to talk about the criminal indictment process first, since it's the smallest amount of time. The district attorney presents a case and facts to the grand jury. I'm going to make this up, but say if the district attorney has 1,000 cases per year, there would only be 5 or 6 cases they would actually bring to the grand jury. Everything else goes through the regular process of preliminary hearing and the regular court process. I'm not a lawyer, so I don't understand all that process. Don't pretend to understand or know what I'm talking about there. But they do bring certain cases to the grand jury. And so there's an examination of witnesses and evidence that's presented to the grand jury. And then the district attorney will present the elements of law, what we need to look for. Then the grand jury will deliberate. It takes 12 out of 19 of the grand juries are needed to be there in the room all the time for deliberation. The legal standard during this process, the indictment process, is only a preponderance of evidence. Keep in mind, nobody's been charged yet. So it's not beyond a reasonable doubt, like in a trial jury. It's only the preponderance of evidence. And it's an indictment, not a conviction. You have a conviction in a trial jury. This is just an indictment that the grand jury will come down with. And then depending on the indictment, the district attorney does not have to prosecute further. In other words, they don't have to go forward with their case if they don't choose to after hearing and going through the deliberation process. So you wonder why the grand jury will bring some cases to, or why the district attorney will bring some cases to the grand jury, a very few minor of them. And these are the reasons why they're more likely to use the grand jury indictment process if any of these following things are true. If there's a high public interest in the case, or the case involves wrongdoing by a public office holder, they'll bring it maybe to the grand jury because everything in our panel room, conference room, is confidential. In fact, they destroy all of our notes and everything at the end. And we take to the grave the confidence of the words that were spoken in that conference room during those deliberations. Now, we can talk about it later after it's in the press and after it's in the open and after it's gone to court through that, but I can never say verbatim anything that was actually quoted in that room. So if there's a high public interest in the case, or if a preliminary hearing would take more time than a grand jury hearing, a district attorney would know that simply because in the regular process, the calendar could be full and maybe they wouldn't get a hearing for 6 months down the road, as an example. So that's why they might take it to the grand jury instead. Or again, if a prosecutor wants a chance to test a case to see if the evidence is strong enough, or if the prosecutor plans to call witnesses who are children or minors who would not do well under cross-examination in open court. And I'm going to show you an example of that in a minute. Or if witnesses are incarcerated in state prison, they would rather bring those witnesses into our closed confidential panel room versus open court. And I'll show you an example of that. We were hit with this case right off the bat as soon as we were seated, practically. There had been a task force of the Mexican mafia. And this was one of the prisoners from state prison that came down and talked to us. It was a very extensive case and quite a shock for a new grand juror just being seated to have this one. But this is some of the headlines that we had at the time. The police round up 129 gang suspects in huge Mexican mafia raid in Orange County. So it was very extensive. This was one of the guys that they brought into our conference room, and he sits down right beside us. We say, "Hi, how you doing?" And he is providing evidence, giving testimony. He's a snitch, basically. I might say that I saw him more recently, just about a year or so ago. Within the past year, I should say, he was in the newspaper again. So they have another case. But our case was called Smokin Aces, and it was a task force of the FBI, the DEA, Santa Ana Police Department, Orange County supervisors. It goes on, and it was very extensive. So that was the type of case that we got to hear on our year of the grand jury. This is another case where we talked about the children. They don't want to bring the children into open court with the press and the public and everybody being able to see them, and they'll bring them to a grand jury in our closed room again. I don't know if any of you remember this case, but it was back in 2015. And you can see it's already been adjudicated and in People magazine. So I can talk about, what's in People magazine. I can talk about that, what's out in the open. But this was a family. This young man came home from college one night and he shot and killed both of his parents while they were in bed sleeping. And that same night, he shot at his 15-year-old sister, and he shot at his 8-year-old brother. He did shoot, he hit the 8-year-old brother. He's in a wheelchair for the rest of his life. And at any rate, the sister and the brother did testify evidence. And rather than have them testify in open court, they brought them into our courtroom to testify. So that's another example of what the district attorney will do. So that's all I'm going to say about the criminal aspect. The other aspect of civil investigations are really what take up the bulk of the grand jury's time. Again, as I mentioned, they have powers to investigate county organization, investigate city and county governments, go through county procedures, malfeasance of public officials, and again, the public complaint letters. So that's the civil side of it. Again, they are a watchdog, basically, over anything in Orange County, quite honestly. And this is just a graphic. If you look at the grand jury right there in the middle, they overlook county departments, special districts. Last I heard, or in my year, there was like 50 some special districts that received tax money from Orange County. So we have, we are empowered to investigate anything in a special district. Again, all 34 cities, agencies, And again, watching that tax dollars is spent wisely. And again, the jails, they are mandated to look at all the jails in Orange County. I looked at some of the reports. They're all posted on ocgrandjury.org, and I'll show you that website in a few minutes. But I looked at just the last 5 years of reports, and these are the subject matters that the reports dealt with. You can actually get in and read the reports, but if you want to just get an overview of 30,000-foot overview, as they call it, these are what the reports dealt with. I believe you can read that, the airport, cannabis, county and city government, criminal justice, sheriff operations, cybersecurity, economic development, on and on. What I did, I put in green the 3 items that are very recent reports. If you want to know what's actually trending out there, and these were the last year's report, they did one on cannabis. You won't find too many reports on cannabis in past years. Cybersecurity, and of course on the pandemic. And I just wanted to point out that those are very recent reports just put out this past year by the 21-22 grand jury. Other reports that have been put out more than one time. And I honestly have to say that most reports have to be reported, most issues have to be reported on several times over the years before action is really taken, just like our federal government. We all know that the legislature has to go through many times on an issue. And so like environmental, the jail detention facilities, of course, and transportation, those were reports that have been reported on more than once in the past 5 years. I put this going back the last 10 years because there were some other interesting issues that haven't really been brought up in the last 5 years, but yet I'm saying, are they still on the radar? And yes, they are. Watch out for the reports that are being put out just this month in June. They'll just up until July 1st when the new grand jury is seated. But watch out and see if any of these reports pertain to some of the older issues, the animal control and animal shelters, domestic violence. My jury did a report on domestic violence, elder abuse, child abuse, juvenile issues. I was involved in that report too. Sex trafficking, and that goes along with human trafficking, as they call it more recently. And then, of course, water, the drought, and the sanitation systems. So those are all things that have been reported on frequently in the past 10 years. People will always ask me, how do you come up with and decide what you're going to report on? I think of that 1 year as like a school year, your first year of college. You really have to get organized and decide what you're going to major in, type of thing. So some of the ideas, as a truly independent body, each grand jury is free to choose which governmental entities or public officials to investigate. Again, like I said, nobody from the outside can tell the grand jury what to look for or what to investigate, except for that one thing, the condition of the jails. So the ideas for investigations generally come by way of these avenues: citizen complaints, matters raised by members of the grand jury, referrals from a preceding grand jury, and then really, this is the main one, whatever is currently trending, whatever is a current issue. So basically, the grand jury acts as a fact finder. They determine if an official or entity is adhering to the laws, and they analyze that tax dollar money taxes are being used effectively and economically. Now, this last point I'm going to make is one that a lot of people like to bring up to me and tell me, you know, the grand jury really has no power, quite honestly. So I'm going to say that while the grand jury has no authority to order or otherwise compel compliance with its recommendations, it is through its reports that the grand jury wields its power. In other words, the grand jury has the bully pulpit, the press. So those reports they have been issuing attract the attention of the media, and the resulting public pressure often prompts the implementation of the recommended changes. So I'll digress for a minute too. Someone asked me just the other day, so are you saying that the grand jury acts just like the January 6th committee that we're seeing do hearings right now? And I had to stop and think. And I went back and checked with a few other people to make sure I was accurate, not saying something I shouldn't say. First of all, there's nothing political in the grand jury. Absolutely no politics are involved. But yes, just like the January 6th committee has no power to imprison or carry out any of their recommendations, they are making them public to the public, and that is exactly what the grand jury does. So the procedure and the process is similar. So I'll just let it go at that. So the California Penal Code provides requirements to respond to the findings and recommendations of a grand jury report. So if it's sent to public agencies, they must respond to the findings and recommendations within 90 days. Or if the report is sent to a county officer or an agency head, that person must respond within 60 days. So again, there's a protocol for responding. So with findings, the respondent agrees with the finding or the respondent disagrees wholly or partially with the finding. So they have to make that statement on the findings. And then there's 4 different ways they can respond to the recommendations. They can say the recommendation has already been implemented, or the recommendation has not yet been implemented, but will be implemented in the future. And they have to give a time frame for when that's going to happen. The recommendation requires further analysis by the entity, and that's not to exceed 6 months. Or lastly, and this is a good one, the recommendation will not be implemented because it is not warranted or it is not reasonable, and they have to give an explanation thereof. Now, again, this is all in the public window, so everybody would get to see why an agency would refuse a recommendation by the grand jury. I'm going to give you an example of something that happened a couple of years ago, actually, which is a pretty good example of the way the process works. Hopefully this will come on. Okay. It's not going to come on. Okay. Wonderful. But this is about a report that had been done on the Orange County Animal Shelter. And the report basically says, and there were 5 different reports that were done over a 15-year time span. And a reporter picked up one of the reports. He's at the Orange County Animal Shelter, and he's saying that the grand jury has stated that the animal shelter has been plagued by deplorable conditions. Okay. Okay, and at any rate, they talk about, they show some of the deplorable conditions on the newscast on Channel 7. There was a very good outcome to this particular report after all it was said and done and aired in public view. And some of the responses, oh, here we go. Okay. This is a result of the report, not naturally, they don't take full credit for it, but this is one of the wonderful outcomes of looking at the Orange County Animal Shelter. Is a brand new animal shelter that has been built in the city of Tustin. They're near the blimp hangars and around the Tustin Marketplace. And I visited actually this facility just the other day and did talk with some of the other volunteers. I might mention some of the other items in the report, lack of leadership and some of the other issues that were brought up haven't necessarily been fully completed, but this is one of the wonderful outcomes of what a grand jury focusing on something and bringing it to the public's attention can speed along. Not that they weren't going to do it eventually, but like they said, they've been saying the same thing year after year. Ms. Logan said that, and so this is one of the wonderful outcomes. This is a compilation of last year's reports. They did 5 reports last year, the 2021 reports. The county publishes a booklet like this of all 20 reports. They're all published separately, but they come out separately, I should say. But keep in mind that last year's grand jury was under the pandemic, and they had a whole bunch of issues to deal with that most of us don't have to deal with over the years. So usually there's more than 5 reports that come out, but last year's grand jury did publish 5 reports. As I understand it, the grand jury was not, the 19 people were not allowed to be together in that conference room, hardly ever. They were spread out through the suite of offices that the grand jury oversees. But one of them was in the kitchen, and I know another lady that was in the broom closet, and then a couple of them were in different small conference rooms or small interview rooms. So they did have some issues, but they did some excellent reporting last year on the toll roads. They did another one, of course, that was very interesting, and I'll talk about it in a few minutes, but their jails report, the condition of the jails, they brought up some interesting issues. They brought up the licensed retail adult use cannabis in Orange County and the fact that Santa Ana has a monopoly, a report on that. And again, the Orange County evidence booking issue that's been going on for some time, and they were looking at that. Has it been resolved? And last but not least, they looked into the Orange County pandemic preparedness. Were we prepared for a pandemic? And so they had a lot of interesting things to say about that. So I would always recommend that you looked at that. Let me show you just one report looks like this. And it, you know, is 10, 15, 20 pages long, whatever is necessary, going through the whole process. And there's a certain protocol that the editorial committee follows to make sure all reports are done basically per protocol. And then again, it's published for purposes of the law library, and each grand juror is given a booklet of all of their reports. I might mention that when I was on the grand jury, we did 14 reports, and we had a pretty large booklet, but we had better access to each other than this most recent grand jury did. So let me go on. This is where it really comes into play. The newspaper reporting and internet reporting and anywhere you get your news, they have the ability to sensationalize and use the bully pulpit to make things happen. So the news reporters, they truly watch out for these grand jury reports that are published on the grand jury website, and they're watching for them. And then they have the ability to make headlines that are a lot more interesting than what the grand jury can do. And I mentioned something about the jails report. This one, in a scathing report, Orange County Grand Jury describes shackles during birthing and care delays in custody. That's a very interesting report on the jails that particular year. They actually found in the women's jail women that were in labor, ready to give birth, were still in shackles and were basically ignored all through their labor. And it's a very interesting report that you might read, and hopefully it will lead to a little more attention being given to women that are in custody. I can go on and on about the reports, but again, like the one right there in the middle, the Orange County Grand Jury issues a report on the county's pandemic response and their plans. And of course, the grand jury, or Orange County, was not quite ready for a pandemic, just like the state and the federal and everybody else wasn't ready either. So it's a very fair report, but a little more interesting when it's put into the newspaper. And I might say there's certain newspapers, there's certain reporters themselves that cozy up to the grand jury and are kind of on the lookout for things that happen, and because that's what they need to do their job. This is the reporting system. If you go onto ocgrandjury.org, you'll see that all the reports for the last 20 years, this goes down to the year 2000, starts with the year 2000. Each line item is all of the reports that were published in that particular year. It's not the most exciting thing to read it like this. That's why I say when they're published in the newspapers, it's much more interesting than otherwise. If you were to click on just one of those years as an example, I clicked on 2019-20, you'll see the title of the report is right there. And then it was addressing all of these entities that are listed below. And then the responses of those entities is what you're seeing below, and the date that they did respond. So you can go through and read any report that you might be interested in on the ocgrandjury.org. I'm going to back up now just a little bit and talk about the organization of the grand jury, just in case any of you are interested. Like I said, this is not a recruitment talk, but you guys are qualified. And so if anybody's ever interested, this is the process that you would need to go through. Again, it's a one-year term. It starts July 1st and ends June 30th. So they just picked the 19 grand jurors. They just had a drawing last week of the 19 grand jurors that will be seated on July 1st. So they're getting ready to be seated. And actually, they're being trained right now by the seated grand jury. So again, all of the applicants come into the court. They get maybe 100 to 200 applications per year. You actually have to go onto the grand jury website and apply. You can apply online, or you can get an application filled out. I think you can still fill it out yourself and send it in. But the applications are sent in. They're getting fewer and fewer every year. And so that does have the courts a little bit worried. But they will paper vet the applications. Just look at, your applications they received, and they will paper vet them down to about 90 just by looking at them and seeing how qualified the people are. They will, the last 90, and they will choose these 90. They'll try to make sure they have like 18 per each of the 5 supervisory districts, so that it's well represented throughout the county. So that's what they start with, 90 people, that 18 per supervisory district. And those 90 are vetted by the county, and it's a very thorough vetting process, let me tell you. They do background checks on you, you do fingerprinting, they do credit checks on you. An officer will come out to your house, sit down at the dining room table and talk to you, making sure that you're legit. And by the way, while he's sitting at your dining room table talking, there'll be 1 or 2 other officers out in your neighborhood talking to your neighbors about you. So if anybody ever applies for the grand jury, be sure to tell your neighbors that what you're doing, so they won't be worried about when someone knocks on the door and wants to talk about you. So, but at any rate, it's a very thorough process. It takes quite a few months. And then they will come down to a final selection of the 30 grand jurors. So there will be 30, And then you'll all be, those 30 will be called into a courtroom. And this just occurred last week, where they will all have their names one at a time put in a hopper, a bingo hopper, you know, where you pull out the bingo things. They'll pull out the cards with your name on it, 1 through 30, and they'll keep track of the order. The first 19 will be seated as the grand jury. The next 11 will be the alternates, and they will replace anybody on the first 19 that can no longer serve out their year. And so they will be called upon in the order that they were selected and pulled out of the hopper. So that's the way the members are selected. Working hours, like I said, our working hours when I was on the grand jury, and that's what I can speak to, 8:30 to 3:30, Monday through Thursday, 4 days a week. We went to the courthouse. And then on Fridays, we only worked from 8:30 to noon. But I can honestly say that many, many times we took work home with us. We worked on weekends, or we showed up at events on weekends or evenings as needed, depending on what we were looking at. There is a stipend of $50 a day, and plus mileage. You get mileage to your home, from your home to the courthouse. But I heard somebody say the reason they call it a stipend and not a salary is because it doesn't begin to come up to minimum wage. But actually, in all honesty, the California Grand Jurors Association is working on getting that raised to $100 a day. And it's going to be a process, just like everything else. So good luck on that. When you're seated, you do have, you pick your election of officers, just like any board of directors that you all belong to. In this case, you have a 4-person that is going to lead the group, the jury. And that 4-person is selected by the judges, but all of the rest of the officers or positions are selected by the grand jury themselves. And they're just typical secretary, assistant secretary, sergeant of arms, historian, and parliamentarian. Those were the ones that we had. That can change from year to year. The grand jury can set up and operate any way it wants to each and every year. But again, as I said, you'll break into committees, and think of it like a school year or your first year of college, where you had to major in something. So whatever your interest lies in, or wherever your qualifications lie, you'll want to pick 2 standing committees. And these were the names of our committees. Again, that changes from year to year, depending on what's trending in the world. But our committees were the cities, the county government, criminal justice. I was on that. Environment and transportation. That would be for all the engineers out there. Health and human services. And then special issues and ethics. And again, that can change slightly from year to year. And then there's 2 administrative committees that you have to be on one of those, and that's recruitment and orientation. And that's actually what I'm doing right now. So I was on that committee, and I am still continuing to do that under the Grand Jurors Association. And then continuity and editorial. So you get organized right off the bat. The qualifications to serve that you might all want to know. The legal qualifications are probably some that you're very familiar with, same as voting, I believe, or pretty close to it. The operational qualifications, that's a little more serious, and that's really what, when you interview with the judges, you interview with 2 judges and officers, and they will really determine your qualifications to be on the grand jury. You need to have some research ability or the experience thereof, writing ability or the experience thereof. This next one is probably the most important: no personal or political agendas. And I understand from what I've heard that if the judges especially sniff anything that you've got a hidden personal agenda, they will definitely make sure that you're not put on the court, on the jury. Again, you have to be able to work in a group environment. That's, again, very important. I don't know how you determine that at the offset, but I can tell you that you're going to have a bunch of A personalities in the room. And you have to learn to get along, because you're going to be in that room with them every workday of the week for a full year. And then no extended absences. That's kind of important, and that really is what disqualifies a lot of people, especially people our age that are able to participate. We want to travel, and I can tell you, if you have a long, you usually can get a 1-week vacation during the year, but if you have a long trip planned, then that's not the year for you to be on the grand jury. The presiding judge, Superior Court judge, is the coordinator with the courts and the grand jury. She isn't in any of our deliberations or in any of our investigations, but she does oversee and coordinate with the courts. This year's grand jury assistant coordinating judge was Judge Maria Hernandez. I don't know if any of you know her. She has a task force right now on human trafficking and sexual trafficking. She just spoke at our luncheon, our Grand Jurors Association luncheon last week, and she does a beautiful job. Also on this picture, you'll see Doug Gillen, and he is the president of the Grand Jurors Association. But let me have you hear what Judge Hernandez says.
So Sandra, we can't hear the video, and I think you need to unshare. And then when you share, there'll be a little box that says share your computer video sound, and then we'll be able to hear your video.
Oh, okay. Stop share.
Yeah, it's a little box that you often won't see right away, but it says share computer sound.
Okay, pause recording. Is it down here at the bottom? Share screen. Okay, host only. Who can start sharing with someone? Okay, that's not it. Okay, well, let me, I just want to introduce the judge, so let me just go back to that.
Go ahead and share the screen again, because now we can't see anything.
Okay. Am I up here, the screen? And share. Okay, and this is just Judge Hernandez introducing herself and talking about her experience and what she does, and her respect and appreciation of the grand jury. So, okay. And again, thinking of the grand jury year as a school year, one of the very first things that you get to do is see your surroundings. And I can tell you, this was one of the best experiences that I ever had. At the very beginning, you get to go behind the scenes, and you are welcomed by so many agencies and departments and jurisdictions and all sorts of areas, and you get to meet and greet so many elected officials and learn about everything to do with Orange County. I can give you just a couple of examples, and you're treated with so much respect. Honestly, you're brought in and you're greeted, and you know, the sky's the limit. You can look at anything you want to look at as far as most agencies and departments are concerned. One of the things that we looked at right off the bat was the 911 emergency call center. We went up to the emergency call center. We were like a fly on the wall. We just sat there back behind, not bothering anybody, but we watched all day long the dispatchers receiving the 911 calls and then dispatching out the first responders. And just watching that procedure goes on is an education all by itself. And I will always remember that experience of being there that day. We went to the fire authority. The fire authority put on tremendous demonstrations for us. We just felt like we were royalty coming in and getting to see all the different types of fires and all the different types of rescues that they will mimic for us and show us how it's done. We went to the crime lab, again, got to see the crime lab and all of their procedures. We went to the coroner's office, and I saw 2 autopsies. I'm not quite sure why I needed to see the autopsies, but again, going through that procedure was very interesting. Again, we went through the sheriff's department. We saw the shooting range. We saw their training facilities. The airport, we got to go to John Wayne Airport. We went back behind the scenes in the luggage areas, and we got to see the drug sniffing dogs go through our baggage and see if anybody had any drugs in their baggage. Very interesting, watching them spot something. Metropolitan Water District. We learned a lot about, because of the drought that we've dealt with off and on over the years and seems to be getting worse. Quite honestly, we learned an awful lot about Orange County, the imported water from Northern California, as well as recycling water within Orange County, the sanitation districts. We actually did a report on San Onofre. I'm sorry, not San Onofre, but on recycling of the water, whether it should be done with ocean water, desalinization, as they call it, and why not that works. And that's probably going to be an issue that goes on for many years to come. So we did a lot of tours. The transportation system was at our disposal. So if there was something we wanted to see as far as an investigation was concerned, all we had to do was to tell our administrative assistant, and she would set it up, and we would have transport to that particular agency. Again, we got to meet, we went to county departments. We had a lot of meet and greet of elected officials, the judges, and department heads. Some of them came into our conference room and talked to us and greeted us that way. Others, we went to their offices or their departments, and we got around the county quite a bit. I got to see things again that you never would have gotten to see as an ordinary citizen. Probation department, I didn't know much about that. And again, we were like a fly on the wall. I sat in the corner of a probation officer's office for a full day and just listened as the probationers came in and spoke with their officer. And that was very interesting. Again, I did not participate. It was just an observation. We got to go out with a gangland unit. You'll see that there. We again went to, of course, the Board of Supervisors meetings. Again, animal care down there on the corner. If you can see that, that was, again, the old animal care that was at the block in Orange before they built the new one. We went to the Board of Education, Health Department. This last coordinating council, we were lucky. One member on our jury had worked for the Public Defender's Office for 25 years. She had just resigned. And so she knew some inner workings of the county that the average person wouldn't even know about. And so she recommended that we go to this meeting again and be just the fly on the wall, but it's a criminal justice coordinating council, and all the department heads of the Public Defender's Office, the district attorney, the judges, one board of supervisors, the sheriff, they all meet on a regular basis. And so we got to go to some of those meetings and hear what was happening throughout the county. We did ride-alongs. I'm sure that some of you have had the opportunity to do a ride-along in a patrol car. So we did those with the county. And also with the cities that contracted with the county. I did one with City of Mission Viejo. And then we also did different kinds of ride-alongs that I, again, didn't know existed. I got to go on one of the Orange County Harbor Patrol. That's me standing there in the middle photo. And we patrolled around in the harbor. And little did I know that those guys out there in the red boats, even though it says Orange County Sheriff on the outside, I didn't realize those were a real sheriff, and they're a sheriff just like one in a patrol car. And so we patrolled the harbors all day long. Again, very, very interesting. We got to go on a helicopter tour of the entire county, and all of the areas were pointed out to us. Very interesting. And the Equestrian Tours, we honestly didn't get to do that, but that is part of the Sheriff's Department, so I put it down there just for interest. Again, Juvenile Facilities. We looked at all the juvenile facilities. We were greeted and brought in and treated with very good respect. So we went to the juvenile hall. I even left Joplin Boys Ranch up here on the picture, although that has been since closed, I understand. I'm not sure exactly what year it was closed in. It was open the year I was there, but it was closed because it's in Santiago Canyon, and they were concerned that it was low security, but they were concerned that because of the threat of constant wildfires throughout the canyons, that they would not be able to evacuate the boys ranch in a speedy manner if a wildfire did sprout up around that area. So that has been closed, but we went to, again, the Leadership Academy, the Youth Guidance Center, and also Children's Home Orangewood. We saw them. And this is the courts down here in the right-hand corner, the Juvenile Lamoureux Center. That's where all the juvenile courts are handled. And by the way, we could go to the courthouse, but we could not set in on any juvenile courts because that's just restricted and that's confidential because of the juvenile status. We did get to look at all the jails. And like I said, this is mandated. I had never been in a jail before, but I really got my fill. We went through Theo Lacey Jail. That is a high security jail. We went to the Central Jail, which is the men's jail and the women's jail, and then the Intake and Release Center. We saw all those procedures go through. We spent literally, we would go into a jail and go into the community open center and be hand in hand with the inmates. We actually went to a cafeteria at one time and had lunch with the inmates and learned all about the jail procedures. The music jail, that's under construction now, but it was a very low security, and we spent a day out there with those guys in Irvine. So this was a very interesting part, something that, again, the average person would never get to do. But I learned a lot. I learned a lot about human nature and about Orange County. Again, we had jurisdiction, organizational ability to look into anything, all the cities of Orange County. We did do a couple of reports. We did one on Dana Point Harbor. That's been in the last few years, that's been totally rehabilitated and reconstructed. Downtown Santa Ana, that's probably one of the trending issues that are going on right now. As you know, that 3rd Street trolley that they're building, you know, that's closed down a number of businesses along 3rd Street. And I know that's been a very serious issue for those businesses to be put out of work because the construction has taken so long and has been detained and continued on. So at any rate, this was another part of it that we learned throughout the county. So that pretty much is the overview of the Orange County Grand Jury. So if anyone is ever interested, please get a hold of me. I'll be able to take any questions if you can help me with the chat box. Anyone that has questions, I'll be glad to answer anything that you might want to know. Okay.
Actually, I have a question.
Okay.
Okay.
Yes.
Do all county grand juries throughout California have these same abilities to investigate as many areas as the Orange County grand jury?
Yes, they do. They all have the same power given to them. I might say that LA grand jury, Orange County grand jury, and San Diego grand jury, and San Francisco grand jury kind of work on one level where it's almost a daily grand jury duty that you're involved with. The smaller counties are more spread apart, and sometimes they will only meet once a week or 3 times a week. They have a whole different set of, because of the nature of the county being smaller, having less access, and financially, quite honestly, their budgets don't spread far enough apart. So every county is mandated to have a grand jury, but they do look a little bit different, but they all have the same power. Yes.
I do have a question.
Uh-huh.
You said that initially when they're selecting participants, they have, I think you said 18 per the 5 supervisor, and then they whittle it down. But I don't understand how you get that balance if at the end you draw people out of a basket.
You're right. They make sure they have the 18 per the 5 supervisory districts, and that's about the most that they can do to get the diversity. From then on, it's the luck of the draw. And you're absolutely right. That does happen when they come down to the final drawing. And you may have one area of the county that's not represented, but it is set up just like other agencies are set up that way to get the initial diversity throughout the county.
So there's no gender diversity or no racial diversity.
No, no, but that is looked at every year by the courts. And again, my work as far as recruiting with the grand jury and working with the courts and recruiting, they definitely steer me in certain directions, I would say, in hopes of getting applicants from certain areas. I can't do much about gender equality, and quite frankly, that's evening out. I look at that every year, and that's pretty well evening out now, men versus women. The only thing that's really not even out is the age requirements. And it's just a matter of fact that you really don't have time to serve full time on a grand jury unless you're retired. And we've talked about getting young people, college kids, maybe that have a gap year, which is so popular these days. And I've talked to college students. The truth of the matter, when it really comes down to selecting the actual grand jurors, sometimes they don't have the life experience that the judges in the court would be looking for. So to be real honest, we don't have many young people on the grand jury. It's mostly people that are retired from a professional position.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Jody Duran, Abalma has a question.
Sure, I just kind of to follow up, and I appreciate that the grand jury actually publishes the information, and I'll put that in the chat for the demographics. I think the pay is the biggest issue. $50 a day is not minimum wage. So anybody who's in that age gap isn't going to be able to pay their bills with $50 a day. So it means that the demographic lack of diversity is not just age, which is painfully clear that I would be the youngest person if it was chosen, and I'm in my 50s. But it's also wealth. It's also the privilege of being able to donate full-time work for a pittance in reimbursement. So the demographics, the background, the ethnic diversity is not represented because, even though you look at the entire diversity of Orange County and you see that whites are not a majority, they're less than 40% countywide. But when you look at the age that the grand jury is pulling from, it's the same with voter data. If 1 out of every 2 voters on election day was over the age of 65, then they are going to be overwhelmingly white because our seniors are overwhelmingly white in Orange County and statewide. So our grand jury is overwhelmingly white, overwhelmingly old, overwhelmingly wealthy, and not in any way representative when we're talking about some of these issues. And that's great for investigating animal control. It's great for investigating these big civil issues that we need agenda setting for. But I do have major problems with the lack of diversity because it's systemic. It's not going to be fixed when we can't afford to have people donate their time with all those things. So I really appreciate the content. I really appreciate the overview. I think it's essential that we have people. My initial question was going to be, are there term limits? I can't find that question of, do you have grand jurors that are serving? I think not just the life experience that's so valuable. And I agree with you that I think a lot of what we're looking for is that wealth of experience that you do get that way. But are people serving multiple times?
Yes, To answer the beginning of your question, you are right on. You are exactly right as far as the lack of diversity and the reasons for that lack of diversity and why it is a typical white jury. And the courts are very much aware of that. Like I said, that's one reason that cost us the public information officer is trying to get it up to $100. But let me just say that the only response I have to say for that is you look at it as a volunteer and you don't expect to be paid as on a volunteer basis. And so that's really the way you can justify it, that you are volunteering. And yes, you're right, only certain people can volunteer or can afford to volunteer. And that's just the way it is. And I'm sure that everybody's looking for ways to get better diversity on the grand jury in all these different aspects. So the second part of your question, can you, the term limits, yes, you cannot serve 2 years consecutively.
Okay.
But there are several people, many people actually, that are part of our association that have served 2 different times on 2 different years, but not consecutively.
Mhm.
And in fact, Doug Gillen, our president, our current president that I pointed out to you with Judge Hernandez, he actually served 3 different times. He served during the pandemic. They took him for a 3rd time.
Mm.
After that, they looked for fresh blood. I think after
Yeah.
2 years typically, but during the pandemic, they did have some issues with finding good qualified people.
Sure. Thank
Thank
you.
you.
I appreciate it.
Okay, David Duran, question?
Yes, and thank you, Sandra, for your presentation. Very informative. So if I remember correctly, you mentioned that citizens who wanted to submit a letter of concern or something of that sort to the grand jury, provided the entity or individuals received county funds, that was something that could be done. And part 2 to that is, how soon is there such a thing as an average time before a resident or citizen would receive notice that their letter of concern was recognized and will be moving forward, or that, or how does that work? Thank you.
Yes, that's a small part of what happens, and people can go on ocgrandjury.org and fill out a letter of concern. And quite honestly, it depends on at what time of the year that it's filled out, because after the first couple of months, it's just again like majoring in a subject in your first year of college. You have to make your decision on what you're going to look at for the rest of the year. And then you're going to write a thesis at the end of the year. So you kind of have your reports set up. My particular year, I was really lucky. Our foreman had his PhD in education, and he had been in the education system. He was very high up. And so he understood how to run this organization and how to get us organized to be able to write our reports. Those concern letters that come in toward the end of the year, quite frankly, are not going to get looked at, simply because all of the time has been allocated on what the grand jury is looking at. They may be looking at, in our case, it was 14 different subjects. And we all were heavy at work all year long on those 14 subjects after they were decided upon. And I would say that we probably decided on the direction of going that way by September, October. So anything that comes in as a concern letter may not be looked at simply because there won't be time to allocate to the concern letters. That's the only reason, not because they are any lesser concern, but it's just the dynamics of the way the year works out.
Is everyone notified as to whether they will be accepted or not?
Accepted as a grand juror?
No.
Oh, the concern letter?
Yes.
Yes, if a concern letter is acted upon, yes, that person would be contacted. Yes, at that
Thank
time.
you.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Okay, Luis?
Yes. Hi, Sandra. Thank you very much for your report and your information. I just want to also continue making some comments regarding diversity in the grand jury. Not only is ethnicity of concern, but it's also the educational level of people that people need to be members of the grand jury. I mean, in addition to the economic level, the economic issue as well, economic, ethnic, and educational level, because not only do people who participate need to be somewhat highly educated, somewhat because they need to write reports, and there's some sectors of the population that don't have the level of education that know how to do those kinds of things. So those concerns are also seem to be overlooked in the grand jury as well. I mean, I just got that from the comments that you made. And so I mean, that's quite concerning, because if one looks at educational achievement data over the years, people who get to be at the age of retirement to have the time to participate in the grand jury, well, those particular groups, those ethnic groups or demographic groups that don't have historically that level of education, they're not going to be able to participate in there neither. So that's really concerning.
I agree with you to a certain extent. I can say that you're not not selected based upon your level of education. In my grand jury, again, the 19 members, we had a huge, wide variety, from a housewife that worked for the Chamber of Commerce, and that was her level of expertise, to real estate people that, again, did not have a college education, but had investment real estate, all the way from military people that had gotten their experience, their life experience in the military. So no, you're not graded or you're not selected depending upon your level of education. You're selected through this interview process, and they do look back at every job that you've had. I had to fill out every job that I've had. I had to give contact information for every boss that I had, which is pretty hard to do at that point in my life, especially when I worked for the home building industry, and many of those companies no longer existed just due to the nature of that industry. So you are selected on quite a number of things, and it's not based upon, like I said, we were just lucky. We did have as our foreman a highly educated person, and he was able to really navigate and lead us very well. But not every foreman has that experience, and not every foreman works out that well. But again, I understand what you're saying, but I think it's a little bit better than what you were expressing.
Okay, thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, Becky has a comment.
I was just going to chime in on the question of economic justice as it relates to grand juries, and there are experiments going on right now. One of them is going on in San Francisco, and I'm looking because they have something called the Financial Justice Project, which is, I believe, currently actually providing $100 a day, which is still not a ton of money, but certainly beats 50. And they have a lot of different projects to make that happen. And one is that they have a partnership with the San Francisco Warriors, which I think is probably where some of that money is coming from. But where, of course, you have an extremely diverse, but pretty non-white, actually, performing team with the same interest in social justice that I imagine all of us have, and certainly the League does. So there are some things happening, and later I will send out something that has a link to that particular organization. I can also put it in the chat. But I thought it was fascinating reading, and I suspect they're not the only folks doing this. I've actually talked to Costas about this, and he is aware of this particular experiment, and I think I also sent it to you, Sandy, and probably to Wanda. And thank you very much for the presentation as well.
You're welcome. Thank you.
And Sandy, the request was for your contact information. Maybe you could put that in the chat,
Okay, I sure will.
and you can unshare your screen now too. please.
Okay.
Sandy, I want to thank you so much. This was really wonderful. I really appreciate you taking the time. And I am so glad that Coast found you as a speaker, because it's